Chat Night Africa Live, about to begin.
I'm coming back. I'm coming back. I'm coming. Coming to get down. I'm coming. I'm coming.
Chat Night Africa Live, Afrocentric solutions to Africa's challenges.
We're gonna dance. We're gonna get down.
Showcasing Africa's touristic luxurious.
We're gonna party. Party hardy. We're gonna boogie.
The other story of Africa.
And when we jam, it's out of sight. This song right here.
Chat Night Africa Live, about to begin.
I'm ready. I'm coming. I'm coming back. I'm coming back. I'm coming. Coming to get down. We're gonna get down. We're gonna get down. We're gonna dance. We're gonna dance. We're gonna dance.
Chat Night Africa Live, about to begin.
Coming to get down. We're gonna dance. We're gonna dance. I'm ready. I'm coming. I'm dancing. I'm dancing. We're gonna dance. We're gonna dance.
And now, Chat Night Africa Live with Divine Chamoko.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Chat Night Africa. Seeking Afrocentric solutions to Africa challenges is the holy grail at Chat Night Africa. This is just not sloganeering. To make the case is Dr. Richard Munang, a UN expert on climate change and development. Now, let me ask you this question. Do you have friends or relatives unemployed in Africa, especially in Africa? That's why you ought to pay attention to this broadcast. Again, my guest today is Dr. Richard Munang. Stay tuned to this jaunty broadcast.
Today we are going to discuss a subject that is known to us all, but is never discussed the way it's supposed to be discussed, which is telling half-truths is not good. We should stop telling half-truths and start telling the truth, but not telling the truth to hurt anyone or injure anyone, but telling the truth from the dimension of solutions. When we say that 257 million Africans go to bed hungry, these are not statistics, these are human lives. But we should not only stop by saying that 257 million people go to bed hungry. We should stop by saying they are going to bed hungry and we are losing 48 billion US dollars in post-harvest losses. What can we do about it? And when you say what can we do about this, don't sit. Be part of the solutions providers' direction. Engage people so that solutions can start to be devised. When you say and sit complaining, you are also part of the problem. Those are half-truths. When we say that 48 billion US dollars are going down the drain every year as a result of these inefficiencies in the agro-value chain, we should not only stop in that narrative, sorry narrative of sympathy, but we should ask ourselves, what is happening and what can be done? And we should not only stop there, we should now start to inspire young people and guide them so that they can devise solutions like solar dryers to be able to help mothers in villages reduce these post-harvest losses that is becoming a menace in the continent. The overarching point is that half-truths are not going to help advance the cause of driving climate action. Climate action needs a whole of society approach. Half-truths from each and every one of us means that the challenges we face, we must also discuss them from a solutions perspective. The reality is that in every challenge, there is a disguised opportunity. In every problem, there is a positive side. And we must always tackle that positive side, because when you focus on the narrative of negativity, on the narrative of weakness, it disempowers others to take action. positivity triumphs and focusing on the positive aspects, we can be able to move not only forward, but inspire a generation like never before to take action and solve the challenges that have bewildered us in a way we have never ever seen. This is what we must do. There's little that we can see that is happening. Young people from the western part of Africa turning west to briquettes, turning west to plastic tiles, to the young people in the eastern part of Africa who are leveraging local solutions to devise solar dryers, and down to the southern part of Africa and the central part of Africa. These solutions need to be brought to scale, and the best way to bring them to scale is to continuously inspire these young people so they can impact others with the knowledge and the skills, train them, exchange these ideas, and bring solutions to the fore. Negative narratives destroy and retrogress. Positive narratives inspire and motivate. Let's choose positive narratives and move away from half-truths to full truth. And the full truth is only around solutions, not blame game, not finger pointing, but solutions, solutions, solutions.
Solutions, solutions, solutions. That's why we're here on the show this week. Ladies and gentlemen, join me now in welcoming the UN expert on climate change and development, Dr. Richard Mina. My friend, welcome to Chat Night Africa. You are connecting live from one of Africa's most beautiful, most technologically advanced cities, Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you for accepting to come on this platform, Dr. Muna.
Thank you very much, Nidivine, for having me. It's a great pleasure to be on Chat Night Africa.
I've watched a lot of your videos, Dr. Muna, and you are so audacious, so unequivocal that Africa can turn its waste into economic opportunities. What gives you that optimism, Dr. Muna?
Thank you very much, Nidivine, again for having me. It's a great pleasure. The reality is that you can only work with what you have. And if you don't leverage on what you have, you can never be able to make progress. But that's not the mindset in which we've been made to believe. We've been made to believe that you have to wait for something that you don't have to be able to progress. And that's a fallacy. It hasn't worked for so many years, and it will not work for the next 100 years. But what's the point? We must look internally and leverage on the challenges we have as disguised opportunities. If you look at the entire African continent today, it's a continent of adversity. That's true. Yes. But behind every challenge, there is a disguised opportunity, a disguised way in which if that challenge is turned into an opportunity, there will be immense wealth created. And so when you look at Africa today, whether we talk of food insecurity, 257 million people going to bed hungry, or we talk of indoor pollution, 600,000 people die as a result of this indoor pollution. When we talk of kids, 50% of kids die before they reach the age of 5 because of malnutrition. These challenges are disguised opportunities, and Africa cannot solve them by always depending on what others can do to the continent, but they have to start looking internally. And we have been disempowered not to believe that solutions can come from within unless they are validated elsewhere. And that is a fallacy. And that gives me that optimism that Africa's solutions are African people who can then be able to self-believe. And by self-believing means that they can know that they're the ones they need to be able to tackle the challenges they have been facing. And that is what gives me that hope. And the young people are actually trying to inspire that further.
Dr. Richard Mina. Dr. Mina, you have traveled the length and breadth of Africa. You've been to 46 African countries. What have you realized are the major challenges facing the African youth today? Politics or economics?
Both, but the reality is that socioeconomics defines everything. without putting food on the table, which is the priority of everyone across the continent, whether young or old, in the northern part of Africa, southern part of Africa, eastern, western, and central part of Africa, the aspirations are the same. People want to go to bed with their kids fed. They want to put a roof over their heads. They want to send their kids to school. Those aspirations are the common denominator that defines everyone, young or old, across the continent. But this is the point. The reality is Africa's vulnerability. We have climate change displaying itself in terms of flood and drought, causing our mothers in villages to lose what they grow. That's a fact. But at the end of the day, what matters is that if socioeconomic opportunities are not created, the vulnerability in terms of not having even the self-confidence, what I call emotional poverty, will continue to exacerbate. And therefore, what I see across the entire continent with the young people is that lack of self-belief. They have everything it takes to be able to move the needle forward, but they do not have that self-confidence that they are the ones they need. And so inspiring them to self-belief and tap into their skills, their entrepreneurial spirit, their creativity, their energetic ability is what they need. And they just need to be told and inspired and guided that they can unleash that to turn the many challenges they see into socioeconomic opportunities. And I just want to say one aspect. There is no better politics than socioeconomics. When people can feed themselves and they can put food on the table and put more money in more pockets, the rest will take care of itself.
Is it a question of self-confidence, lack of self-confidence, or lack of awareness? You are so adamant that African youth, Africa is sitting on a gold mine. Prioritize this lack of. Is it lack of awareness or lack of self-confidence, sir?
Both. And the reality is this. If you do not look at history, or this African proverb eloquently captivates what I want to describe here, that you do not look where you fell, but you look where you sleep. Africa has been looking where it's fallen rather than where it slipped. And when you look at history, what has been the issue has been an attitude and a foundational issue of attitude. The attitude of dependency, the attitude to blame somebody for everything that goes wrong, rather than taking responsibility. The attitude that if somebody doesn't do it for you, then you cannot do it. The attitude of disabling the mind, of disempowering the mind, that you must be validated elsewhere before you self-believe. And as a result of that, we have given up. When I say we have given up, we've given up from the perspective that we cannot be able to think solutions to the challenges we face unless someone validates. That we cannot be able to do it without money. And that's a misnomer. Money is part of a means, not an end. But we've made money an end. And that is part of the disempowerment. Because of that, the narrative have been around problems, not around solutions. That if I don't have money, I cannot be able to do anything. And as a result of that, we stop before we start. And therefore, that disempowers us. And then the awareness has been around problems, not solutions. That when we are growing up, we are not told that education is a license to become a solution provider. We're told that education is a license to get a good job and feel good. That's wrong. We're not told that even having a PhD means nothing unless you touch the life of your mother in a village. That's wrong. We're not told that instead of talking problems, we should move beyond just talking problems to solutions, and that even when we talk solutions, we should be part of those solutions. And that narrative have disempowered. And so the awareness has fallen short because it's been around problems, because they are overwhelmed, aren't they? Now, how do you get to solutions if you didn't start talking about problems in the first place? Discussing problems is important, but that should not be just about discussing them, because talking problems is the easiest thing. And one thing that we need to all understand is that problems are disguised opportunities. If you do not have a problem, what are you going to solve? How are you going to test your skills? How are you going to leverage your talents? It is in difficulty. Necessity is the mother of invention. And it is only when you have a challenge that you can then invent and innovate. So Africa is actually supposed to be the testbed of the best innovations in the world. And of course, that's starting to come out. But we must then be able to know that when we talk challenges, we cannot just remain there. When we talk problems, we cannot just remain there. We must talk the solutions, because with every problem, there is an associated solution, and those solutions need people. And more importantly, one aspect that I've been overlooked is that human capital is the biggest capital. It outweighs material, it outweighs money. It is people that produce capital. It is not the other way around. So I've never ever understood why money has always been put in front of a human ability, because a skilled human being is 4 times the value of produced capital and 15 times the value of natural capital. That is the value of all the minerals we're talking buried underneath. That means a skilled human being is the best sovereign asset that everyone should be able to have. So if you have 10,000 people who are skilled versus 10 million people who are not skilled, the 10,000 people are your biggest asset comparatively.
You have insisted that Africa's problems provide a repository of economic gain, economic progress, economic activity, opportunities. Some would dismiss this as book talk in the university. You were at Harvard University, one of the best in the whole world. Some would dismiss that as book talk, abstract ideas. How do you concretely demonstrate this?
We are in a continent today that imports food worth 35 billion US dollars. Did you hear that? 35 billion US dollars. And this is projected that in the next 5 years, this amount will increase up to 110 billion US dollars. That's Africa importing food. What does that tell you? Africa can be able, Africa have the means. Let me now bring it back home. The very continent that imports food is having 257 million people going to bed hungry every day as we speak today. Every night they go to bed hungry. These are human beings. These are not just figures. On top of that, the food our mothers grow in the villages, whether it is in the northwestern part of Cameroon, eastern part of Cameroon, in northern Nigeria, in northern Kenya, in southern Zambia, it doesn't really, our mothers in villages, these are human beings. We all came from these villages. So this is not an abstraction. Grow their food and it gets wasted. It gets lost because they lack the preservation techniques. These are facts. These are reality. They grow their vegetables. They grow their cocoyams, their cassava. They're unable to dry these, to preserve these, and they get wasted and they get lost. They end up poorer. They end up sometimes not having been able to put food on the table. What does this mean? It then means that we must be able to look at local solutions that fits context, to be able to devise these solutions so that the response to these challenges that our mother faces, the mother face in these villages. And when you look at this, the solutions from elsewhere have proven to work sometimes, but not optimal. But local solutions have proven to not only work, but to create opportunities for people who are willing to retool their skills. And that 257 million people who need to be fed represents not just a market opportunity, but also represents a window that can actually touch lives, create wealth, and you hear me using this word wealth, not jobs, a lot of times, and I'm going to explain that. Create wealth, and then the 48 billion that is being lost as a result of lack of preservation, lack of adding value to what is produced, represents 48 billion market opportunity. That then means if you are able just to devise a local solution, like a simple solar dryer and decentralize to these mothers in villages, youth will be creating jobs for themselves in developing these simple solutions, but at the same time solving a problem that is touching the lives of 257 million people who suffer each and every night as their stomach rumble of hunger.
And our guest this week is Dr. Richard Munang. we believe, our mindset at Chat Night Africa, Dr. Richard Munang, is pursuing Afrocentric solutions to Africa's challenges. That's why we click so well, because that's also your mindset. Why do you think that Africa tends to look elsewhere, overseas, Western-centric solutions to its problems, especially economic problems?
Very simple answer to that, again, is lack of self-belief. We do not believe in ourselves, and we believe that the solutions to the challenges of Africa must come from elsewhere. And that's a misnomer, that's a fallacy. That is why it is very, very important, and thanks again, Nidivine, for this amazing platform where you're not only helping to demystify the narrative that we cannot be able to solve a problem, but also to discuss it from an African-centric perspective, in that if you do not make people to believe, the biggest thing one can do to anybody is to make that person know that you are able. If you do not make a human being know that he or she is able and he can be able to do it, you disempower that human being. Once you disempower that human being, that is the biggest loss that you can have as a family, as a community, as a society, as a country, and as a continent. And that is the problem. But here's the point. The young people of the continent gives hope in that they have that window in which they can be made to know that instead of importing food or looking for solutions elsewhere, your solutions that you devise will not only bring you money, but will touch a mother's life. Because the reality is we've not communicated selflessness, legacy. We've communicated individualism most of the time, not collectivism. What does that mean? If in a community we can be able to come together to do something that can be able to put food on the table of a mother, feed a baby so that she can live beyond the age of 5, that is a legacy, and that is more than money, but that brings money. The point is every challenge solved actually creates money. Money becomes a consequence of a challenge being solved, of a problem being solved. Money cannot take precedence when there is no challenge being solved. And that is, the narrative has been that we are poor. So we have never been told that we are actually rich, that a skill is an opportunity for you to solve a problem. And as a result of that, we tend to look only elsewhere, and that's not sustainable. So we have to start looking internally and looking at the challenges and inspiring young people to be able to devise solutions. And we are practically doing this across the continent, whether we're talking Nigeria, we're talking Kenya, we're talking Togo, and young people are starting to believe in themselves to devise solutions that are needed in the continent. And that narrative of solutions is going to gradually start to disincentivize this belief that if you don't look east or look west, your problems cannot be solved.
You talk about wealth, not jobs. That's intentional.
Yes.
Why is that so?
Jobs are an offshoot of a wealth-creating system. The mentality of job disempower people to think holistically, because having a job is about survival, and having a job might not necessarily be about part of a broader system. Let me just give a very practical example. If you take our mothers in the village, a mother in Flunkankang or in Bali or in Jinkwing or in Sambura in northern Kenya or in Lusaka in Zambia, they face the same challenges. That mother is producing cassava, for example, and she needs inputs into her farm. That means she needs fertilizers, but she doesn't have the money. She wants fertilizer that will make her farm to produce her cassava. So she needs organic fertilizer. But when she produces the cassava, she also needs to add value to it so that she can turn to cassava flour. But this input into her farm, this organic fertilizer, can be produced using agricultural waste. So turning agricultural waste into organic fertilizer, very simple techniques young people are using across the continent are doing this. Automatically, that turning of agricultural waste into fertilizer so that that farmer can apply in her farm, applies that fertilizer in her farm, produces a cassava, needs to add value. That then means that she needs a solar dryer to be able to dry that cassava so that she can turn it into cassava flour. The person who is getting the agricultural waste and turning it to fertilizer is creating wealth because he then sells it to this farmer. This farmer then grows a cassava, then uses the solar dryer, which is produced by a different person, to be able to add value and then sells her flour to a vendor and then puts money in her pocket. That then means from the development of the organic fertilizer to the solar dryer to the farmer who finally sells the flour, money is entering into everybody's pockets and everybody is happy. That is not just a job creation, but it is a wealth creation because money gets to more pockets and problems are being solved. But when we only talk about jobs are offshoot of a system that creates opportunities for many. And that creating of opportunities, solving problem is the real kind of world thinking that we need. And that is not what Africa has prioritized. We've been told that if you do anything to make money, whether it is causing a problem or solving a problem, that's a job. We've never defined a job from the perspective that is supposed to be an offshot of solving a problem in a system thinking way where everyone benefits. And that is why it has made Africa to be where it is today. We talk jobs, we don't talk wealth creation. Wealth creation is about solving problems in a holistic, systematic thinking way where everyone benefits.
Dr. Munang, I listened to many of your videos, and I'll be frank with you, your passion, your energy got my attention. But beyond that, your propensity to think solution was a step forward, because when you listen to big book Africans like you, we're hearing complaints. France did this. Britain did this. Portugal. So it's all about blaming the colonial masters. You are different. Why are you different?
Thank you very much. I think that there are a lot of people who are doing what I do, and
a lot of them.
The question you ask actually also means that you're thinking different. So that's an excellent question, and thanks again for asking that question, Divine. This is the point. If one is sincere, and I always say this, there's an African proverb that goes that if you close your eyes to facts, you will learn through accidents. And I believe that with sincerity, sometimes we are afraid to discuss solutions because we think that despite the fact that we have the facts, it will not fall right in the ears of others. That is wrong. I do not think anybody will be penalized for speaking the truth if he's speaking the truth to genuinely, meaningfully solve a problem. It is when you are speaking the truth to use it to blame others that becomes a problem. And that is what we Africans are very good at. We like to speak the truth sometimes, but to use it to inflict pain on others, not to speak the truth, to then explain next steps and how you yourself can be part of that next step, turn that challenge to an opportunity. As a result of that, it's happened over 60 years, and the number of poverty levels have increased in the continent. The number of joblessness, especially of young people, as we're speaking today, 13 million of them get into the labor market competing with just about 3 to 4 million jobs. That is a ticking time bomb. So if we just join the chorus and the choir and sing the problem song, in the next 100 years, nothing changes. So when I look at that, and having seen it, and having grown up in a village just like many of us and yourself, and having seen our mothers who never had anything but were able to put food on the table, were able to work around the clock, were able to still bring up to where we are today, then you ask the question, why can't you do it better? And the best way to do it better is to inspire people to know that they are the solutions they need and guide them so that they can self-believe, because the biggest issue in the continent is lack of self-belief. And that I call it emotional poverty. Because let me just say this, Divine, if you look at the continent today and you take a 10-year-old comparatively to a 10-year-old in another developed country, and I'm not really going to name countries, but you understand what I'm talking about and the viewers understand. The 10-year-old in a developed country already knows what he or she is going to do even in the next 5 years or 10. They already have aspirations of what they want to become. And they're not talking about what they want to become because there is money in it. It's about their passion. It's about to solve problems. But when you come back to the African continent, when we get up in the morning, a bulk of the young people, especially which I deal with them, they know what is happening in the football field in some countries. I'm not going to name the teams. We know the kind of teams. They know the first 11. They know even the wives of the players. They know even what they eat and what they even shop. but they do not know about themselves. They do not even have a plan for themselves. So when you forget yourself and think only about others, that's what you get. They say you get what you deserve. So we need to start dismantling that kind of mindset that you determine 99% of what you become. Don't blame anybody. People can only help to advise and guide you, but you, the individual, must first take the responsibility to then be able to think what you can do, and people can guide you. Because if you take a horse that is not willing to drink water, even if you take it to the stream, nothing happens.
Doctor, I told you, Doc, that this is going to be a different kind of broadcast. I want to really thank you for coming, my friend. The other question, I see you identify the agricultural sector and the textile sector as major areas which would create millions of jobs. You isolate Cameroon to even say that if it paid attention just to the waste disposal to transform it into textile, it could create 13 million jobs. That's excessively optimistic, some people will say.
Those are facts. The reality is this. Let me just take the agro value chain and then get to textile. The estimations are that in the next 10 years, the agro value chain in the entire African continent is worth $1 trillion US. That is the amount of development aid that has come to the continent 60 years, since 1960 till that. But in 10 years, Africa can be able to leverage that in the agro value chain. And the question is, why are we not doing it? When we actually know that we can then be able to put food on the table and create the jobs. So when you look at the challenge of food insecurity, if you want to make billions, that's where you need to go. Let me just say this. Africa is a very royal society. Over about 60 to 70% of the population is real. At the same time, 80% of the entire population of Africa, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, is informal. And this informal sector actors are engaged in the agro value chain, most of them, but they do not have the service, the inputs to be able to add value to what they produce. And they need just simple solutions. So if one can be able to guide young people to develop just simple solutions like the solar dryers. These are not complicated technology. These are simple technologies that can help a farmer who takes 7 days to dry her food, to dry her vegetable, to now take only 24 hours to do so. That puts money in those who are developing those solar dryers in the pockets, and that helps that mother to then sell her vegetables, sell her cassava that can now be turned to flour and make more money. So money will flow in the community. It will help these people in the informal sector. You take Cameroon, for example. 90% of the population of Cameroon is informal. And they are engaged, 53% of this informal sector are engaged in agriculture. The remaining 37% are engaged in construction industry, carpentry, construction, builders, and the others are engaged in hospitality and retail, like kiosks, like fashion. And when you look at those who are engaged in fashion, fashion is actually the second most important job creating sector after agriculture in the continent. And when you look at what they do, most of the people who are into this fashion now are young people. Part of the biggest e-commerce in the continent is about fashion, is about apparels. And so one of the things is that the fashion that we are talking about today is not sustainable. It takes 8,000 liters of water to produce one pair of jeans, for example. But what we are doing with young people is that plastic waste, which the entire continent generates 180 million tons of waste every year. Cameroon generates 600,000 tons of waste every year. This waste is a resource that can actually be turned into billions. Young people are now turning that waste and now developing that into different fashionable materials, shoes, bags. And if you see this, you will really be amazed. And so what we are doing is we're engaging those young people and guiding them on how to do that so that they can now become incubation centers to help engage every young person who is willing, especially across the African continent with Cameroon inclusive. So what is the point? You tap into what people's passions are also in. And if you look, the fashion industry, especially in the African continent, is worth $31 billion US. That's only after agriculture worth $1 trillion, where it can inclusively engage everyone in the society. That is where the big money is going to come from. And that's where the jobs will be created and wealth will circulate in the economy.
Here is what Innocent Share writes. When did you develop your own passion to become an environmentalist? Doctor, was it at 10?
Well, when I was growing up in the north, in Jinqing, which is where I was born, born 1978, like every son and daughter in most rural Africa, they grow up the same way. You go to the farm, your mother farm her maize and vegetables, but we used to see crop failure. And I've always been asking myself, what happens that we plant sometime, we have a bumper harvest, and some years we don't. And as a result of that, you start to see even rivers drying up, and those sort of things start to cause some curiosity inside me. And as I went to school to study, my hope was always to try to find a solution to some of these challenges. I am an environmental specialist, but if you notice, my focus and interest is really too much into food security because of what I saw. The challenge that my mother suffered was the same challenge that a mother in Mali will suffer, and a mother in Kenya will suffer, a mother in Zambia, a mother in Togo, a mother in DRC will suffer. So looking at that caused not just the interest, but I also then later on noticed, if you are to align solutions to challenges that touches a mother in the village, you will not just be helping solve a problem, but you will actually be inspiring an area that has been forgotten for a very long time. Just the case of Cameroon I gave. 90% of the population is in the informal sector. And only about 4 to 6% are in the formal sector. Those are those employed by corporations, employed by government. That means if you can devise a solution that touches the informal sector, you will not just solve a problem, but you will create the biggest wealth-creating opportunities that exist in any country. And that's where it's been forgotten. And my passion is actually geared as a result of that solutions to touch lives in communities, but at the same time ensure our mothers who suffer so much can be able to also tap into these solutions and solve the problems.
I am going to open the phone lines now. You can call and disagree, even if vehemently, with Dr. Richard Munang, or agree, or just make another contribution, or give other perspectives to the discussion. Chat Night Africa is not intended to be a one-party type discussion where people are only sending motions of support. So you can dial 240, listen to me very well. You can dial 240-603-7367, 240-603-7367. If you're overseas, 2001 first. You can do this as a WhatsApp call or as a direct call. This is Chat Night Africa. I'm your host, Divine Chamukong. Dr. Richard Munang, you in your videos insist on recycling and reusing waste to manufacture synthetic apparels, for example, shoes, dresses. How do you get past this mentality problem that Africans don't even want to wear what they produce? Have you attended an African wedding in the United States? You find the latest suits from Paris, from Italy, from England. They're not wearing the kente that you're wearing.
Again, lack of self-belief and wanting some external validation, which disempowers the mind. I go back to what I said earlier. But this is the point. You work with the willing. This is, I fervently believe, and I think this has been tested. I've tested this. You can only work with the willing. And what happens is that when you come up with an idea, or when there is an idea, potential idea that you think can work, not everybody is going to embrace it. That's true. That's the society in which we live in today. And we need to be realistic. We cannot be oblivious of the fact that people are not going to embrace what is right, even when they know it is right. So what do? You engage the willing. And what is happening is that you engage the willing around areas in which they are also passionate about. And as I said, the young people in the continent, most of them, if you go to Twitter, you go to Facebook, you go to LinkedIn, you go to Instagram, it's about fashion, fashion, fashion. It's about them exchanging what they wear, what they like, and all those sort of things. And when you look at it, if you are able to orient them to see that what the inputs they can get to be able to design different fashionable apparels or shoes or dresses, that they can now craft a niche of their own to make more money, they listen because they already have a passion around fashion. And as a result of that, the young people that we've engaged across the continent have been passionate about this, and they have developed that interest, and now they are turning west, plastic waste. They're turning waste now to produce shoes, to produce handbags. They are using their skill because most of them already have the sewing skills and design skills, but they are now leveraging on that to be able to use waste as a result, which is cheaper because you don't have to pay for it. You pick it because it is disposed. That means it lowers your production costs. But they're designing things that are almost similar to what society needs, but at a lower cost. So it means society now will start getting to it because it's almost like what they need. And the young people, because they are the biggest constituents in the entire African continent, are actually loving to explore those sort of things. What am I trying to say here? When you engage people from what they are passionate about, from the area in which their interest is in, it's very easy to be able to make progress, but at the same time, it must be able to help them see value. Value is important. And what's the value in this case? A new niche in an area where they can be able to make more money, low production costs, what I call non-capital intensive cost sector, but at the same time, having the populace, especially the young population, that is not only savvy in this fashion, but know that they can then be able to make impact. And what we're doing, we're getting these young people to train others across the continent, leveraging on what we call innovative volunteerism.
What has been the response so far? You've traveled the length and breadth, widely across Africa. What again, before you get to answer the question, the phone is here, ready. This is the phone. You can dial the number on the screen. My director of transmission, Mr. Mumbalingwa, has put the number on the screen, 240-603767. Thank you, Mr. Director of Transmission, Chat Night Africa. You have gone around Africa, and I said in the beginning, 46 countries you've visited, working on all this, inspiring youth. What has been their response? And before you answer, before you respond to that, or reveal what the response has been, well, I'm going to tell you that Ndop rice in Cameroon is not the favorite of Cameroonians. They prefer something from overseas. And Ndop rice is sitting right there, and we importing rice. Same story in Nigeria. They're importing stuff which would have been produced locally. We just don't like what we do or produce.
This is the point. When you dry your rice on a tarmac.
Okay, we have, I'm going to interrupt you. We have a caller. Hello, Mr. Innocent Chia. Good to hear from you, brother. How are you doing?
Hello, my brother, Divine, and hello as well to my brother. And I mean that literally. He's my brother. So I have a quick question for him in terms of sustainability of what he is proposing, right? He's talked about the fact that these young people have this passion to do these things in fashion, and I agree with him that may be well so. But in terms of sustaining what they are doing, in terms of being able to find the capital, what's been the most challenge for him, for these young men that come up with these ideas on doing these things in the area of fashion, but do not have the money, A, to make a sustainable project, B, to compete against the big houses, whether it's in Europe or others, if you're looking at the people that are really wealthy and may not need to start at this basic level, right? How is he able to challenge these people to overcome, these young entrepreneurs to overcome the obvious obstacles on their way? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Innocent Chair. Now your answer.
Yeah, thank you very much. Big bro, Innocent Chair, yes, as you said, that's my big brother. I mean, and he's a very, very inspirational human being. Thank you very much. A very good question. This is the point here. The reality is that you can only work with what you have. And I say this really literally because if you look at what you don't have, you will never have it. And we know this, Innocent, because from where we come from, the reality, you work with what you have. And by working with what you have, that's when you can make more. If you want to start with what you don't have, you will never, ever make more. And this is the engagement with the young people. What we are seeing working very, very excellently is that there is the forgotten societal aspect that has been missing in this discussion of money. We have never leveraged on what has been our social fabric, which is cooperatives. We call them Jangi in Cameroon. In Kenya, here in East Africa, they call them chamas. Leveraging on the spirit of cooperatives. When we are growing up, our mothers could contribute 20 francs, 50 francs to buy our books as we go back to school, or to buy a bench in church, and the list goes on. When we leverage on communal cooperatives, this is the spirit that not only bring people together, but these are low-risk financing institutions, which we are demonstrating across the country, the continent, that when young people come together with these skills and they're developing whether solar drive or they're turning waste to briquettes, they together, as they're doing this, the little money that they are raising out of this, they register in a communal cooperative. And they, as a result of registering, not only have access to be able to take little financing to boost their enterprises, but at the same time, they are building on structures that will last, not externalizing the financing situation that has always been, but now indigenizing the solutions, especially from the financial perspective. And that is the biggest sustainability. Leveraging on the communal spirit of cooperatives is the best sustainability financial way forward for the entire African continent. I am in no way saying that there should not be support externally for the youth in the continent. What I am saying is, if you do not anchor on what you have, you will never have what you don't have. And if you have what you don't have, without anchoring on what you have, it will soon go away.
This is Chat Night Africa, and my guest is Dr. Richard Munang. I was asking you a question before my friend Innocent Chia called in. You can dial the number which my director of transmission has put on the screen, 240-603-7367. When you dial that number, you will be live on Chat Night Africa. I want to also thank my production supervisor or advisor, Dr. B. Tatsong Famunda, for the comments she's been posting. Dr. B, if you want to dial in, by all means do so. Anyone who wants to participate, you can call and disagree with Dr. Munang if you want to, or agree with him. That's democracy in action at Chat Night Africa. Yes, I was asking you a question. How do you change the appetite of somebody back in Africa, or switch it from liking rice, imported rice, to liking something, homegrown?
Yeah, thanks again, Nidivine. This is the point here, and we need to be also realistic. Rice grown and dried on the tarmac, or dried on bare ground, loses quality, loses taste, and sometimes the one that is imported tastes better. That's one point. The second point is that we believe that what comes from outside is best. That's a mindset issue. And what we need to start doing is, Rome was not built in a day. And I keep saying this. I mean, this is, I'm a realist. I don't believe in some kind of abstractions and theoretical models that cannot be practical with reality. We all Africans, we grow up in this part of the world. We know how the context is. Rome was not built in a day. I go back to the point, work with the willing. But the point is, when a mother grows, when rice is grown in up and it is not dried using the requisite instruments that is supposed to be used to dry, when it's dried for 7 days, it's soiled with stones and dust. It compromises the quality and even the nutritional value and the taste. What do you expect with rice that comes from outside that tastes better? Is that an excuse? No. The fact is that even if it is dried using a solar dryer and the taste is not compromised, because people already think that what comes from outside is best, they will go for what comes from outside. But what do you need to do? You need to start moving beyond just rice, to start turning that rice into other products. And you start thinking of how you can produce rice breads, you can produce rice butter, rice flour, and all those sort of things. Young people are starting to showcase that when you mix rice with cassava flour, with cassava, it's not just nutritive, but it's been used to make porridge for people in East Africa here. And that is creating huge markets for young people. So we must innovate and add value to what we produce, not only stopping at rice, but moving beyond what we can do to be able to add value to that rice, to tap into other hidden opportunities that exist there. The problem is we stick at one point without experimenting other aspects that can happen within the value chain, and then we complain. But that notwithstanding,
we have a question from Victor. Hello, Victor.
Fine. Good evening, Chat Night Africa, Chat Night Africa Live. This is Vig Wenger. Thank you for accepting my call. I have a question for my brother, Dr. Manang. And I want to reference what he said earlier. Are you getting me?
Yes, sir. We're listening to you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So he mentioned earlier in terms of in responding to a question that our brother Innocent asked, that question was about the challenges that the youth face in kind of the sustainability related to this project. And he mentioned communal financing and cooperatives. I wanted to extend that a little bit and then ask the question in relation to this rice issue that is mentioning. Part of the problem, as we say, yes, we might not consume the Ndob rice, but my view is that our products should not only be meant for local consumption. These products should be prepared for external consumption as well. Just as you mentioned earlier that Africa imports food, Africa should be able to export its products. So even if the Cameroonians are not consuming Ndob rice, is it being prepared in a manner that can be exported to other markets? Because when you go to any other market, you're going to see multiple products and people have a right to choose whatever product they want to purchase. So my question then is, in terms of building this youth and helping them to get these products, whether it's fashion, whatever it is that they're producing, is there also communal work or cooperatives that need to be created in order to be able to amass, find the necessary market for these products that is external to the locality, so that we don't only depend on the local market for the products that are being produced? What do you say about that?
You probably want to hang up so that you can respond to. Thank you, Victor Wenger. Your response, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Victor Wenger. I mean, always great to hear from you, and a beautiful question, amazing, timely question. And the answer to that is yes, markets are people, and they're not just people within your surrounding or within your country, but even externally. And that question is coming at a very opportune moment, because we're talking about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. That is a market of about $3.4 trillion US. Let's not even look beyond Africa. And what is going to happen is that what is produced, how it is produced, and whether the safety nature of it becomes very important. So what we are doing with this youth is we are working with national bureaus of standards so that what they are producing, is it fulfilling the standards in terms of working with nature, not against nature? Is it fulfilling the safety standards? And that is why the solar dryers of how they are doing it are benchmarking with the standard marks of the national standards and even the Africa standards regional organization working together with them so that what they are producing can fetch a market in Nigeria. In Nigeria, what produced in Nigeria can fetch a market in Cameroon, can fetch a market in South Africa and vice versa, and even beyond to out of the continent. But just to add to that, what I always say is the exporting out of the continent is okay, but tapping into the continent's disguised opportunity, which is the people that need the very products that are being produced, have not been exploited. And so we will hear people wanting to export out of Cameroon when they have not also explored other parts of Cameroon, whether the people need what they produce. But your question is timely in that Africans should start thinking how with the Africa Continental Free Trade, which represents a 3.4 trillion market, they can tap into that. And that's how we're engaging these youth and grooming them, that what they produce fit those standards, and working with the national standard bureaus at country level, both as well as at the continental level. So that is being done.
Here is a question from Bob Mike. You comment on the role of political governance on youth entrepreneurship. I'm going to extend the question. Dr. Muna, are you avoiding politics? I mean, because everything in Africa is politics. You know, it's politics. If you talk about importing things that are produced locally, you have politicians who make sure that those who produce locally don't have their way. Why are you taking this out of the equation, sir?
You get what you deserve. Let's be realistic. We were born in this continent. Let's be realistic. We grew up in this continent. And you do not change or devise. I always say this, you do not fight existing realities. What you do is you devise models that make existing realities obsolete. You come up with innovative approaches that make existing realities obsolete. If you fight it, you will not succeed. What am I trying to say here? Let's be realistic. The attitudes we have as citizens of the African continent, regardless of which part, we have the attitude of individualism rather than collectivism. We like to work alone. We like to succeed alone. That's realistic. All of us will agree. That's what we grow up doing, and we see it. When you go up, they want to pull you down. When we go up, we don't want to lift anyone from the bottom. These are hard truths, and I speak it as it is. The second is we are selfish. We do not nurture selflessness. And when we grow up with that selfish tendencies, wherever we end up displaying those bad attitude values of selfishness, thinking that we can succeed alone. And the last one is we do not inspire one another and inspire one another. Of course, some of us do, you guys do, but I am talking in the broader context of 1.2 billion citizens. So what is the point? The point is governance is a manifestation of attitudes of human beings, because governance is not buildings. And these youth are not just an entity. These are individuals with different aspirational intentions that needs to be guided, that needs to be motivated, that needs to be inspired to do what is right, even if it might not be comfortable saying it. And so helping them to work in groups, to work as a team, is already demystifying that individualistic and selfish mentality that sometimes we allow to flourish. And so helping them to work together and to solve problems of community means it's not just about money, but it's also about touching lives. And that cultivating that attitude in them, to know that selflessness is virtue, to know that touching a life and leaving a legacy is more important than just amassing wealth, that working to drive your purposeful pursuit, which is the most important aspect of being useful, is important, means they will grow up to display those attitudes that are about selflessness, not selfishness, that are about collectivism, not individualism, that are about hopefulness and not hopelessness.
This is powerful. And the number again, my director of transmission, Mumbalingwa, put it on the screen. If you want to talk, ask a question, challenge Dr. Munang, you can call the number 240-603-7367. That's the number on the screen, 240-603-7367. I'm going to ask you some questions on climate change, where you're an expert advising governments on climate change. I'm going to ask you some questions about that. But before I get there, so somebody listening to all this, I mean, the potential, the market potentials, the resources. And you're not talking about going overseas to buy these things. You're talking about things just around your waist, turning wastes into marketable, trending textile products. Somebody listening to you, a youth who doesn't have work, tell me, where do they start, sir?
Very important question, Divine. And I will start by saying this, what you have said is what is realistic and what is happening across the continent. East to west, north to south, central, those are realities. And those realities, let's start first of all with a young person, a dropout, who doesn't even have first school living. This, we have them in our community. And the first question, building on what you said, is how do they then turn this challenge into opportunities? The answer is that they cannot look at material because they don't have that material. They don't have the money. That's true. Let's be realistic, because I don't want to talk about abstraction here. I want to be as realistic as I can get and what we're doing. But what that person have got, he needs to look inwards because he has the ability of selflessness. What's selflessness? You can be able to volunteer yourself to do something to learn a skill without necessarily having to wait and say, oh, if I don't get money, I'm not going to do it. The second is to swallow that empty self-pride that most of us have. That empty self-pride is what is really destroying a lot of people across the continent here. And then what does he do? Once he does that, then he needs to volunteer his or herself to learn something that he or she is passionate about. Let me just ask this. How many of us of these young people will be able to go up to a farmer and say, I want to understand how you dry your cassava or how you grow your cassava. You're not going to end up doing that, but just because you need to work with these farmers, and by working with that farmer, you can have a network of 1,000 farmers in a village, which then means if you learn a skill for a solar dryer, that becomes your market. That attitude is not there. So that youth firstly needs to know that he needs to come out from that high power horse, that high horse, calm down, and then swallow that self-pride, and then learn a skill in an area in which he or she is passionate about. And they're all passionate, they have their own passion. The second is, still with that scenario, let's take the predicament of a university graduate with a degree in history, a degree in physics, a degree in environmental science, a degree in geography, etc. It doesn't really matter. Who has been applying for jobs and he or she is not successful? That's the reality of today. Fewer jobs. Then what do you tell? What do you tell the person? You can't just say turn opportunities to challenges, and the person doesn't have the money, he doesn't have the material. What does he have to look into? Selflessness again, and calm down from that high horse. But one thing that we all learn as we go through school is that we must be able to self-train ourselves, and we must be able to look for the right information. You will see them on Twitter or on Facebook talking other things, but not even trying to engage and find out how they can learn a skill in which they are passionate about. So the point I am trying to make here is that someone must be willing, and when that person is willing, he will be guided. And by guiding that person, he must build on what he has. He must voluntarily volunteer himself to learn a skill, because that takes me to the second aspect, which is usefulness. You cannot bring value to the table when you are not useful, and you cannot be useful when you don't bring an extra skill. It's not about PhDs here. It's not about masters. It's about what value do you bring to the table. And so if you do not have a job, can you be able to self-train yourself? Can you be able to move down from that high horse and self-train yourself in an area? If it is fashion, can you be able even to volunteer to learn how to even shake that machine to sew clothes, so that at least as you expand your passion in that, you can then be connected? Because if today you connect young people to others to train them, and their interest is more about just making money, they want to be part of the product, not part of the process. So you must start to be part of the process. And I always say this, little by little grows a banana. That's an African proverb. That means Rome was not built in one day. But the one to rise up today, you need divine. You are not where you are today just by default. It's effort. It's hard work. No pain, no gain. So let's be realistic. We must be able to sacrifice through the process to get the product. They want to get the product immediately because that's what society have also made people to see, that when you are up there with a big car, you are more respected than someone who's devising a solution to solve a problem. And if he doesn't have money, then he is nobody. So we have glorified material and made solutions to take the bottom, to be at the bottom rather than be at the top. And so it makes a young man not even to do anything because he said, Master, I need to get money. Now, if I don't get money, it means they're not going to respect me for society. Terrible.
Here is what somebody says. I'm going to bring the comments on the screen. That's Eunice Sandra Basung. Again, you can dial the number 240-603-7367. 240-603-7367, and you'll be live on the show. You'll be questioning or challenging Dr. Richard Munang. Here is what Eunice says. Dr. Munang, is it true that Africa's ability to reach its economic potential has been hindered by brain drain, loss of well-educated professionals who seek opportunities overseas?
I have said this and I will say it again. The challenges, let's be also realistic. The Africa of today is not the Africa of the 60s or the 70s or the 90s. There have been progress. Is it enough? No. I always say this, if you do not appreciate progress, you can never make meaningful progress. Even in individual self-life, if you do not appreciate what you have done, you will never be able to make progress. That's the reality. We'll keep on complaining. The truth is that the context and concept of Africa's development is a misnomer. It is development about we talk about jobs, we don't talk about wealth. We talk about money, but we do not talk about the real sovereign capital and asset, which is people. Human capital is the biggest capital, it's people. We do not talk about how we can be able to train people, to educate people through schools by making them to know that a certificate bequeaths them the responsibility to devise solutions, not only to look for a job. We do not educate people to know that you are supposed not only to think of working from 8 to 5 for a paycheck, that whatever thing you do, you should be connecting it to touch the life of a mother in a village, regardless of profession or regardless of which portfolio you hold. Because organizations are people, and people come and go, but individual you remain. So when you make that you bring things from that perspective, that development is done by people. What others do can only be to facilitate it. That people do development for themselves. It's not done by others for them. Then Africa starts to develop. The reality is that the model of development has been about, if I don't get money, I'm not going to do nothing. If I don't have money, I can never ever do anything. And it disempower people to think that if you are not holding a high position in a corporation or in an organization, it means that you are wasted. That's a fallacy.
Here is what Innocent Chia writes, and he ends with a question. There is a 1959 accord cooperation between France and over 14 African countries that use the CFA francs. Among other things, it means for over 100 million Africans in those countries that they do not have the first rights to business opportunities. The French have first dips on natural resources that are discovered. How do you recommend the young entrepreneur to handle this? That's Innocent Chair.
When you look across the entire African continent, the communities, let me take Uganda, for example, where we've worked there, leveraging on the communal system, but also leveraging on local governance. There is the Buganda Kingdom, which is actually one of the biggest and powerful kingdoms in the entire African continent. We're leveraging the structure of that governance. Why? Because the governance structure that are local, especially that particular one, having a population of about 12 million people, when the king speaks, his word is policy. And within that, they have created a cooperative that serves the people, but also inspire people to serve what they generate from what they grow, from what they produce. And this is actually, they call it Pewosa, and that is actually one of the most powerful cooperatives I have seen. What am I trying to say? We must leverage on what we have, and we must build also around what we have got. We cannot only talk about what is external. Of course, the influence of externalization is felt across the entire African continent. But if we belabor on that a lot, without also focusing on what we can control, we will end up losing what we can control and what we have in our own means, and that will go to waste, and we will end up moving nowhere, but the problems will continuously get reappearing and reappearing. My point is simple. We leverage on what we have, build on it, and start to create that groundswell of solutions and expand to where they are willing to accept, and from there we can make progress. However small it might be, progress is progress.
My social media platforms manager, Mr. Roger, he's in Lagos, Nigeria. Here's what he writes. African form of education is to enslave them the more. We are not trained to be self-employed. We are trained to be dependent, not independent. We need more entrepreneurs in Africa. Here is the basic question I draw from what he asked. With the education that almost every African country, citizens of every African country have, how do you expect them to just move from that kind of education where they're trained to work for somebody and not trained to be entrepreneur to just become entrepreneurs?
Good question, and thanks.
That isn't that sounding like trying to squeeze water from a rock?
Thank you. Good question. This is the point here, and I would like to be as frank as I can get, because I mean this is a conversation. It's not like I don't have all the repository of answers to all of this, but I can also speak from my experience as other complement, as I can see in the chat here. This is my point. Education is not just classroom education. I think this is where we missed the point. It's not that four-corner classroom that we spend 7 years primary school, 5 years secondary, 2 years high school, 3 years university, and then we get to do a master's or a PhD. That's not just education. When we are 2 years old and our parents start to blame our uncles that they are rich and they're not helping us, without telling us that you need to grow up, study hard to solve that problem of maize harvest losses that are happening in our village, of crop failure that is happening, to develop a skill to come back and design structures that are not like the ones that are building. That's not what we hear. We hear that our uncle is wicked, that brother or sister is not helping us. Then entrenching an entitlement mentality, what I call the dependency syndrome. And as a result of that, the kid grows up, even before he gets to primary school, he already knows that someone has to do something for him by right. That entitlement mentality is entrenched right from the home. The second dangerous one is now the education in which we get into now, the formal education, which then tells us that when you graduate with a certificate, you are entitled to a job, without being taught to focus on the problems and devise solutions. And that is because the education system in Africa is not indigenized. It is an external offshoot of so many things that happen, and we're not going to change that in a day. The best education is not only in schools, it's also what in our individual capacity we can do using platforms like Chat Africa Night to say a certificate bequeaths each and everyone to provide solutions, to devise solutions to challenges. And if you would do a certificate, you cannot be able to ensure that you are using it to devise a solution to touch a mother's life in the village, then it's just as good as it can get. And that success is not about going to the top. Success is about lifting others from the bottom of the pyramid. So education is not just the classroom, but it's also our engagement in society. When we start to appreciate people, when we start to be collective in our actions, not individualistic, when we start to be selfless in our actions, not selfish, that's education that Africa needs today. So to change education, the classical primary, secondary that we see every day, it's going not just to be about talk. It's going to be us who start now to engage even those with education and certificates to show that they can tap 150 billion in the agro value chain that is going on top in the continent. They can tap 20 billion, which is a charcoal industry, by devising solutions using waste to make briquettes, to make burgers, to make fertilizers, and they will be billionaires. Then they will start to see, oh, this is a different kind of thing that we can start doing, and they will start even to open academies. It must not only be governments to open academies. Governments everywhere do not have, they are not the repository for solutions for everything. It is us, the people. So what's my point in simplicity is that the mindset of entitlement, that we must blame everyone for our problem, is what is holding us where we are. Will things change overnight? No. But can we start? Yes.
That is thought-provoking. You know, when I told people that when you come, there'll be fireworks on this platform, people thought I just was talking. Now, here's our mantra. We pursue Afrocentric solutions to Africa's challenges. It could not be better crystallized than what Dr. Munang is saying here. We have a flurry. It's like a host of questions. Lambert Bomb, I got all kinds of questions. Let me see. This is from Sino William. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. Thanks very much for the talk. Doctor, do you have some ideas or projects that people can invest in within the agricultural sector? Now, we're getting practical throughout the broadcast, but I'm sure that somebody's trying to get out of this blame game mentality and step into something that produces, I didn't want to say jobs, but produces wealth.
Absolutely. And I think there are a lot of them. I think what we did earlier was good to diagnose the problem and lay the foundation of the challenges. And now is the real work, because you can only get the real work when you have the people with the right mindset. Across the entire agro value chain, I always tell people this. People think that agriculture is about production, because that is what the colonial mentality made the continent to believe, that if you produce without adding value, then you are better off. And that was a kind of a slavery till today. We produce. And I always make the case that if Africa was not producing enough, how can we be losing $48 billion if there was nothing produced? So that's a fallacy. So what's my point? My point is, if you look, just forget about production here, because if you look at tomatoes, if you've happened to go to Makenene and all those other places, they display them on the road. The next day, they throw them away. They're losing tomatoes. It's the same with rice. It's the same with cassava, lack of value addition. So the best business investment is to look at, you must develop an interest in the value chain you want to engage. Is it in tomatoes? And if it is in tomatoes, can you be able to start thinking that you can, instead of having tomato processing a factory, you can then look at what the people are currently doing at the moment with their tomatoes, because they're not turning it to tomato paste, they threw it away. So can you start to think of coming up with a tomato factory that uses solar energy rather than using diesel and that emits into the atmosphere, where you can now start processing tomato into tin tomato? And that is going to fill a huge gap in the market. That's one. The second could be, you look at the cassava value chain, and I will speak about cassava a little bit here for about a minute or so, because this is an indigenous crop. Cassava is a climate resilient crop. That means it can grow during droughts and floods. Cassava can produce up to 300 products. 300 products. I repeat again, 300 products. Whether it is cassava flour, cassava bread, cassava beer, cassava cakes, and the list goes on. And the peelings of cassava have actually been used to turn into briquettes that burns better than charcoal and doesn't emit those emissions into the atmosphere. So cassava is actually consumed by 500 million people across the entire African continent. So you already have a market. So if you can be able to come up with a solution or invest in solar dryers production that can be decentralized to mothers in villages to pay just 10 francs or 50 francs as they use those solar dryers, you will be a billionaire in less than a year. And that's one area. Another area is you can be able to come up with a training school or an academy that trains young people with innovative solar dryers that can be decentralized to villages, to then be able to now start creating those youth with skills and talents that now become not just engineers, but they become solution providers. And that way you'll be generating and producing at scale massive solar dryers that can go beyond Cameroon and other African countries to help solve and turn the $48 billion US. You'll be tapping to $48 billion US. Another one could be just to support the fashion industry. So you start generating this plastic waste into different materials and work with the young people to then be able to come up with a clothing line or an apparel line, whether it is shoes, so that you can bring it to scale. You'll be tapping into $31 billion US. So the business ideas are enormous. But the point is this: you will need to have the right mindset to work, because I said earlier, markets are people. Markets are people. So you build your idea around what people want, and you come in to fill a gap that exists. And the biggest gap is post-harvest losses in every community across Africa. If you can bring a solution to reverse those post-harvest losses, you are in the billions.
I would even add, listen, I've been taking notes here, boy. It's like I'm reading in the library here today. One of the joys of doing this show as an anchor is I bring people like you and I learn a lot in the process.
That's excellent.
I'm going to get to your question, but I think one of the key things you have shared on this show is we've got to move away. First, the mindset has got to change. Okay, if the mindset doesn't change, you can give somebody millions of dollars, that money is wasted, is thrown away. Number two, we've got to learn to work together collectively. Somehow, Africans cannot work together. I don't know what's happening. I just don't know. So we have to harness our efforts, come together, because like the bundle of broom, that's when we sweep better. That's when we sweep cleaner. Here is what Lambert Mbom says. Is there a linear path to success? I guess this is not an exact science, and there are a combination of factors to consider. You want to comment on that? Then I'm going to ask you a question on climate change, because 90 minutes, we've got to pack out of here. Okay.
Yes, the truth is this. What we see in the outer surface is usually glowing and excitement sometimes, but we don't know what people pass through to reach where they are. And success is relative. Success to someone might be he wants to be the president of a country or an executive director of an organization. Success to me might just be to touch the life of a mother in a village by a solution for her to dry her beans or her cassava. Either way, it's never easy. It takes effort. It takes planning. People will reject you. That's true. People will let you down. That's true. You will suffer. You will trek. You will try to get resources. You will not get it. But what makes somebody successful is passion. I call passion is the new currency of now. There is nothing that can beat passion. You cannot stop a passionate human being. That's true. You cannot. Because you always devise different alternative means that by the time, because anyone who wants to stop someone is limited. It's limited.
Now,
and the person who is passionate knows how to do it, because he will always have that internal fuel for perseverance and persistence that he will overtake you.
I want to assure everybody that even when this broadcast is ended, I'm sorry for interrupting you.
That's fine.
This guy is a dictionary and encyclopedia. Oh boy, you just amaze me. We're going to pivot. Before we pivot to climate change, I have two questions there for you, sir. I would like to inform all the viewers that keep posting your questions. Every question isn't going to be answered on the show, but Dr. Munang will be in the green room responding to you even after the show. Now, I see Seraphine Tata. Listen, full disclosure, Seraphine Tata, I'm so grateful to her. She in 1982 was one of the persons, I had no training in journalism then, who held my hand up when I was hired as a radio announcer, taught me how to write the first broadcast script for radio, taught me how to even sit at the microphone and talk. What distance? So I am infinitely grateful to this woman. Here, Dr. Seraphine Lenjo, I call her my teacher, says, how do you break through government policies that stifle innovation and growth? I'm thinking of the tax system in many African countries. Answer that very briefly, and then we will go. Again, you can elaborate on that in the green room. But how do you quickly respond to Tata?
Thank you very much. I have said this, you cannot be able to change things in a day, but there is also good that is happening in this continent. Let me just put this in perspective. And I think this is very important, because what Seraphine has brought up is very, very crucial. And it's because people, especially the African continent, think that government have to legislate, put policy, implement policy, monitor policy, and report policy. The world doesn't work that way, especially in the context of the African continent. When there is an enabling environment, it is up also to citizens to leverage it. Let me just say this. Africa is actually discussed as a cemetery for policies. Every good policy is in this continent. There are a lot of them, I've read through them. They're brilliant. But it is up to us individual citizens sometimes to tap. Let me just take the agro value chain. What is called climate-smart agricultural policy, brilliant policies. There are also some with tax incentives called energy feed-in tariffs, whereby if you are developing solar dryers, you do not necessarily need to pay taxes by importing that material into the country. But citizens don't read it, so they keep on blaming government. But government doesn't also explain to them that you can be able to do this. But the citizens are supposed to read and see what is in those policies. What is my point? The simple innovations that are happening, and I've said this, yes, the tax system is in place, but it is only when citizens come together that are innovative and they're trying to do something that they get stifled with that they can unanimously start to advocate for a change, especially in tax policy, by also showcasing what they themselves have done in terms of innovation. When we sit full our arms not doing anything and say, I'm not going to start anything now because government tax too much. Who stop you from helping that mother in a village come up with a solar dryer in that village? Where is the tax stopping you from doing that? Who stop you from helping to learn a skill, to be relevant, to be able to bring value to the table? You hear people talking of innovation, especially the young people sometimes. When they have not even acquired a skill in the first place, they already put the cart in front of the horse. What am I trying to say? There are some good policies in the continent that needs to be leveraged on. You can only ask for more when you have exhausted the little you have. If not, you will never get the more, and the little will slip away.
I read a book. I went to the library. I usually go to the library to read some books, and I saw one there, No Excuses. That seems to be what you're saying. All right. Let's pivot to climate change. You advise governments on climate change. Africans, especially on the continent of Africa, still look at climate change as some white man thing, like some distant thing. In what concrete ways does climate change manifest itself in Africa? Just give me some 2-3 examples. And what you
Thank you, Neil. I think before I get to your question, I need to put this in perspective. Narrative. Africa absorbs everything that comes to them without interrogating. Climate change is a global phenomenon. Africa have contributed least to it. But Africa has never asked the question, what can I do in such a way that as I'm addressing climate change, I'm helping that young man create wealth. I'm helping that mother put food on the table, because the issue of climate change in Africa is that it's about socioeconomic. The vulnerability of our mothers being able not to cope during floods, like what we saw in Zimbabwe and Malawi last year, Cyclone Idai, that killed over 2 million people and inflicted pain on over 5 million, was because
That in Ghana, Cameroon, Mozambique,
Cameroon, and the list goes on. We are talking droughts in the Sahel or in the Horn of Africa that are displacing over 15 million people and increasing food prices by up to 360%. These statistics are not just figures. These are human beings, and we see it every day. So what is the point? The point is the climate change cannot be discussed in the continent as it's currently being discussed, just as an issue that somebody needs to solve. It cannot just be discussed as a social issue. It must be discussed from a socio-economic dimension. What do I mean? The question should be, if a mother in a village who doesn't understand the word climate change, what will it mean to her by talking about climate change? But if I go and talk to this mother about a solution that doesn't cost her that money or destroy the environment, that will help her add value, like a solar dryer, that's a climate change solution. She will embrace it because it is bringing value to her and it is solving a problem. But that is not a narrative that has been taken up in the continent. It's been about, if we don't have money from the West, we cannot do anything. Oh, we are suffering because the West has caused it. Yes, true. Africa is the most vulnerable, and Africa is suffering from a crisis that they have not caused. So what? What are you doing about it? Talk and blame game will not help. So climate change is an investment opportunity, because all the solutions that I talk, whether it is turning waste to fertilizer, turning waste to briquettes, developing solar dryers, those are climate action solutions. But the way to communicate them to the community is not necessarily talking about that big grammar of climate change, climate science, that jargon that sometimes dissuade people rather than persuading them. But we must talk about it from the socio-economic dimension. So my point is, the way we advise government is that when you invest in climate action solutions like solar dryer, you'll be solving the problem of the mother in the village. When you engage youth, so that at least they can be trained in turning waste to fertilizer, to turning waste to briquettes, you are not only reducing a pollution issue that is killing up to 600,000 Africans, you will help you create enterprises around these turning waste to briquettes and fertilizer and biogas, and you'll be solving a climate change problem as a consequence. But the most important aspect is that you'll be addressing the socio-economic challenges that are facing the continent and the country. If you take Cameroon, for example, Cameroon, actually, 7,000 people die as a result of indoor pollution. Those are facts. We have the figures. But Cameroon, over about 80% depend on firewood. What if young people are engaged to be trained to turn waste to briquettes, that will be tapping into these 70% of households that are depending on charcoal, and you'll be saving lives and you'll be creating jobs for these young people. Simple. This is not any rocket science. It's happening in other countries.
And you would be bringing Afrocentric solutions to Africa's challenges. That's our mindset at Chapter Africa. I'm going to ask for a last word, but before I do, Dr. Richard Muna. Coming soon at Chat Night Africa, what are the challenges in raising high achieving and mentally stable children in the diaspora, like in the continent of Africa? My guest is going to be one of the Ada, the most Ada of all Adas in Nigeria. She's called Toyin Adefemi. We will be having that discussion here very, very, very soon. Dr. Munang, your last word, sir, before you go. It's been a wonderful time with you at Chat Night Africa.
Yeah, thanks again, Ni Divine, for having me. There is this African proverb which goes that he who chased the zebra didn't caught it, but he who caught it chased it. What does that mean? You cannot catch a zebra if you haven't chased it. But if you chased it, sometimes you may not be able to catch it. It means you must seize every chance, and you can only start from what you have. And what you have is yourself. And you must be able to add value, because if you do not add value, you lose value. And if you solve a problem, then your problem reduces. And if you complain, like Shakespeare said, do nothing, say nothing, and become nothing. That means we must be able to start bringing value to the table. And to bring value to the table, it means that we must then be able to retool our skills. And that fundamental leads us to this aspect of communicating solutions, not communicating weaknesses. Communicating weakness disempowers and spur hopelessness, which is the least thing we need. We can be able to turn challenges to opportunity by embracing one another, by leveraging on our collective strengths, not weaknesses. You cannot compete from a position of weakness. You can only compete from a position of strength. And that collective action, the best individual action is collective action. If you act alone, you might not succeed. But if you collectively act, your contribution will be more bigger than just you alone. So collectivism and selflessness are the key ingredients that can be able to drive transformational change for people and planet. Thank you.
From what I see today, I mean, you've been live from Kenya. This is not a recorded broadcast. This is an actual production. I can tell truly, as you told me offline, that Kenya is one of the most technologically advanced countries in Africa, second to South Africa. I've tried to interview a lot of people in African countries, and I just cannot get this connectivity work. It just cannot work. I am grateful for your participation. I'll rate it as 5 stars. I appreciate you. As you can see from the comments, many people appreciate you, sir. This is not the last time you're coming to Chat Night Africa. Thank goodness it is possible to connect with you live from Kenya. You're a very busy guy, but still, you made time to come share your wealth, your treasure trove of knowledge with your fellow African brothers and sisters. Shakespeare said, "Oh, I have the eyes to wonder, but lack the tongue to praise." I wish I had enough adjectives to say thank you. But let me just put it simply, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for having me, Nidivine. It was a pleasure. And
that has been our friend, Dr. Richard Muna on Chat Night Africa. My name is Divine Chiamukong. I want to thank my production director, my director for broadcast transmission, my social media platform manager, Roger Fole in Lagos, and just thank the entire production team for having pulled this together. My name is Divine Chiamukong, and I am in Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. That's how we wrap up. Bye-bye.
I'm coming back. I'm coming back. I'm coming to get down. I'm coming to dance, We're gonna dance, we're gonna get down, we're gonna party hard, we're gonna boogie woogie, and when we jam, it's out of sight. This song right here, it's dynamite. I'm ready. I'm coming.